This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. An outspoken Manitoba physician has been tasked with helping the province fix our healthcare system. Dr. Eric Jacobson has been appointed by the NDP as a special advisor. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, one of his priorities will be helping address the staffing crisis in hospitals.
Over the holidays, some surgeries had to be cancelled as Manitoba hospitals were pushed to the limit by a surge in respiratory illnesses amid ongoing staffing shortages. Challenges which are no surprise to Winnipeg-based anesthesiologist Dr. Eric Jacobson. Issues he'll now be involved in fixing.
Long term, we need several hundred healthcare workers, and we can't train ourselves out of this deficit.
Jacobson has been appointed special advisor to the Minister of Health and Premier. He'll lead a provincial advisory table made up of healthcare professionals and make sure workers and patients have a voice.
A fundamental start to fixing the healthcare worker crisis is to engage healthcare workers, make them feel like they're being heard, and to create an avenue for that.
Jacobson's appointment comes as hospitals outside the city also struggle with finding enough people to work. In the western Manitoba community of Roblin, the ER will remain open, but not every day, and some days hours will be reduced. This was posted online by the health region. When Roblin resident Cole Nicholl saw it, he wrote Premier Wab Kinew and several MLAs. He's concerned people will have to travel to nearby communities in the event of an emergency.
Every second matters, and adding more seconds and minutes and potentially hours is just a scary reality.
The municipality of Roblin's head of council, Robert Misko, says a shortage of doctors is to blame. He says the community is working with the health region to recruit physicians and other healthcare staff, but he says finding people isn't easy, especially with other provinces across Canada struggling with staffing.
We're fully aware that it's kind of a rotating emergency, and that's the thing we don't want as a community, because it makes it very difficult for people to predict when they can and when they can't. I mean, nobody wants to go to emergency, but they sure don't want to go to emergency and find out, oh, it's not open today.
Jacobson says addressing vacancies in rural and northern communities will also be a priority.
I guess having a doctor in the house, proverbially, I think will be a great asset for this important role that they have in the next several years.
He'll continue working as an anesthesiologist, sharing what he learns on the front lines with decision makers. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
One person is dead after a house fire in Barren Lands First Nation that happened on New Year's Day. The fly-in communities in the northwest corner of the province. Emergency crews were called in around 5 p.m. Monday. RCMP say several people who were inside the home managed to get out safely, but one person did not. Their body was found in the ruins the next day. An investigation into the fire is ongoing. Now, earlier that same day, 5 homes were destroyed by fire in a tiny northern community called Moose Lake. As CBC's Zubina Ahmed reports, fire spread quickly because the fire truck was frozen.
It wasn't a happy new year for some people living in Moose Lake. Fire woke them up just after 7:30 a.m. It spread quickly, destroying 5 houses and damaging another. 18 people are now homeless. No one was hurt.
The fire truck was frozen too. It didn't even start, but yet they put it on neutral and they dragged it over there because they got that pump going. But when they got over there, they know that the pumps were not working. The ice was frozen solid inside the fire truck.
The mayor says the heaters in the town's fire station stopped working, causing the water to freeze. Eventually, firefighters from the bar arrived to help.
Everybody is hurt by that. Watching these families have no homes, and here in Moose Lake, we're struggling on homes. And now that we've seen 5 houses just went just like that, it's devastated. Everybody is kind of hurt by it.
The manager of a local store in Moose Lake saw the flames and ran to help. He says the fire started in an abandoned trailer and spread quickly because the houses were just meters apart.
Our neighbours had to bring out his own water hose. We were trying to work together, but we couldn't save nothing in time there because we had nothing. It was too fast and it was like the wood was too dry, and the wind. We're just happy the wind didn't pick up because all those other houses would have burnt down if the wind picked up. But we saved at least 3 or 4 houses.
The RCMP says the cause of the fire is not yet determined, but arson is suspected. The investigation is ongoing. Meanwhile, the Red Cross has put up the affected families at a hotel in the Pa for 4 nights. Sabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Some people in Charleswood, Winnipeg neighbourhood, worry it's just a matter of time before someone is seriously hurt in a crash. The councillor for the area wants the city to look at traffic calming measures at a busy intersection. CBC's Cameron McLean reports.
Trains are a common sight here at Wilkes Avenue and Elmhurst Road. Traffic often backs up onto both streets at various times throughout the day. And with high speeds along Wilkes, collisions occur frequently.
It's been really crazy, actually.
Aldiar Ekber works at this auto body shop less than 100 meters from the intersection. Sometimes people get into crashes, then pull right into his shop.
Because it just happens right here, and they have to drive with that broken axle.
Part of the problem is the angle of the road.
Right after the railway, it's a slope that goes down. And in the winter, if it is icy, cars cannot stop.
He also worries about the speed.
It's 80, and it takes time for people to speed up to match the speed. And there's no a merging section.
One area resident has pitched the idea of roundabouts as an inexpensive way to slow down traffic.
With roundabouts, they can fit that into almost any area, so that's the thing that I say, that's a traffic calming. There's no more T-bone.
A 2019 report found the average weekday daily traffic on that section of Wilkes Avenue is more than 8,000 vehicles westbound and more than 13,000 heading east. The report said a traffic signal is warranted, but because of issues related to the layout of the intersection and other city infrastructure priorities, it did not recommend going ahead with it at the time. Charleswood Tuxedo Westwood councillor Evan Duncan says it's time.
With the increased traffic coming from the perimeter, whether that be from Ridgewood, the new development in Charleswood, or from the Seasons to Tuxedo from Route 90, this area has become increasingly busy, causing multiple collisions at this and many other intersections along Wilkes.
Duncan has a motion calling for another study to look at ways to improve safety and reduce speeds, including a review of speed limits. The Assiniboia Committee will vote on Duncan's motion tomorrow. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A PC MLA is defending himself after former colleagues say he tried to push through a controversial proposal to drill for sand in southeastern Manitoba. Jeff Wharton says he was simply trying to help the new government. Our Ian Fraze joins us now live in the newsroom with more. So Ian, we're talking about the silica mining proposal. What is Jeff Wharton saying now?
Well, he confirms that after the election, he, as the departing Economic Development Minister, spoke on the phone about this project with Environment Minister Kevin Klein and Acting Environment Minister Rochelle Squires. But Wharton says he never asked, never pressured them to approve it. All he says he was doing was gathering information to give to the incoming NDP government. Wharton made these comments today in a story published by the Canadian Press. The accusation the Tories tried to push through this controversial mining project is serious. There's a long-standing practice in democracies of what's called the caretaker convention, which means an outgoing government doesn't make major decisions before the new government is sworn in. That's what the PCs are accused of doing here.
So what's been the reaction to this, to the comments that he was just trying to help?
Yeah, political expert Paul Thomas says it's simply not plausible. Bureaucrats are in the room when outgoing and incoming governments meet, not former ministers. Wharton, though, has provided a few different rationales in the past week for his actions. He's denied pressuring Klein. Then he did not answer if he pressured Klein and Squires. Then he accused the two of them of breaking cabinet confidentiality by talking about the calls. Thomas says these explanations don't add up. In an email, he writes, Wharton's behavior is confusing and inconsistent. For whatever reason, he seems to have gone out on a political limb and has been sawing off the limb as he has come forward with different descriptions and explanations about what happened and why. This project remains under review of the new NDP government. Some residents fear their water will be contaminated as a result, while the Alberta company behind this says everything will be safe, and this project could generate $1 billion in tax revenues over a quarter century. Janet.
Ian Frey's live in the newsroom tonight. Thank you for this. Some people in Wolseley are being evacuated because of a gas leak. Officials say the leak happened around 3 p.m. when a contractor working near Garfield Street and Palmerston hit a gas line. Crews are working now to stop that leak. Traffic in the area is closed, so drivers should try to take another route. Some tense moments this afternoon on a Calgary-bound flight from Toronto, which was forced to land here in Winnipeg. RCMP say they were called around noon to deal with an unruly passenger who was on board an Air Canada flight. The passenger had allegedly assaulted another passenger. They say a 16-year-old boy from Grand Prairie assaulted an adult male family member. Airline staff and passengers were able to restrain the teen. The boy was arrested and taken to hospital for evaluation, while the man was treated for minor injuries. No other passengers were injured. The City of Winnipeg wants to know what Winnipeggers think should happen with the old City Hall and Fire Hall in St. Boniface. The brick building, with its domed tower on Provencher Boulevard, has national and municipal heritage designations. Francophone groups have been fighting to preserve the building and the fire hall, which is next to it. The city wants feedback from people about what they'd like to see there. So it's launching an online survey and an in-person and virtual series of workshops. The in-person event will be held on January 17th at Notre Dame Recreational Campus. The city will consider all comments and then make a recommendation to council on the future of the properties. Time for us to check in with meteorologist John Sauter.
Yeah.
A lot of people are wondering, John, if there's snow coming.
Yeah, well, it's a happy new year that may get a little happier for some of us in the south who may get a little fresh coating for the ski trails and snowmobile trails and whatever you want to do with snow in the coming days. Couple of systems I'm watching, so I'll explain them both to you here in the next minute or so. Right now we're at -10. Temperature never really moved much today. The winds have gone calm on us just a moment ago in this latest update. So, yeah, and our relative humidity is at 79%. Wind chill, really not a factor in calm winds. So -10 the temperature right now. We've had quite a bit more cloud around than I expected. I expected a sunny day today, or mainly sunny, at least some sunny breaks, but it does look like some of this cloud is starting to break up to the north of us and out to the west. We'll see how it goes through the later part of the evening, but we're seeing those breaks in the clouds up around Dauphin. The flow is from the northwest. I think the clouds will stay with us here in the Red River Valley through the late evening and then start to break up a little bit overnight, and we will have a brighter day on the way for tomorrow. When we look at futurecasts, there's a couple things to watch for. Let's focus on the north first of all. Here's 8 o'clock on Thursday morning. Snow already into Flin Flon, stretching across into Thompson, and this will be a clipper system that will drop between 5 and 10 centimeters. By the time we get into the afternoon, that system is well off to the east and moving into Ontario, so accumulating snow as well in God's Lake and Island Lake. And while we have some sun and cloud mixed here in the south through Thursday. And then Friday, we have a separate clipper system moving right through in the morning through Saskatchewan, making its way in the afternoon into western sections of the province. And then as we get into the later part of the evening, we start to see that moving into the Red River Valley. And this is also an accumulating snow that'll, like I said to Janet, freshen up the ski trails a little bit. Here's a look at the next 24 hours across the north. We've got a 6 in Thompson and Lynn Lake, 3 in Norway House and God's Lake, Shamattawa, Gillam. So you can see where most of that snow is going to be by late on Thursday. Now let's do a 72-hour look at what's moving into southern Manitoba. Not much up to 2 p.m. on Friday, but as we get in through Friday night and Saturday, that's when we start to see upwards of 5 centimeters in Winnipeg. When's the last time we saw 5 centimeters of snow? Probably back in October, but the amount are slightly higher as we go out to the southeast and on into northwestern Ontario. So tonight is mainly cloudy, but then the skies will start to break up a little bit in the overnight. A -14 low leading to -12 in the morning. And tomorrow we do get to -7, still well above seasonal, but it'll be breezy south around 25 to 40 kilometers per hour. All right, and then into Friday, we get that late day snow. I say here afternoon and evening. The afternoon would be out to the west of the Red River Valley. A few morning flurries or light snow on Saturday, and a few morning more flurries on Sunday, Janet. So, yeah, temperatures will start to cool off and really cool off in the 7-day forecast, which I'll show you later.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
You bet.
The Grand Chief of the Kuwaitan Tribal Council has written several federal and provincial government officials, including the Prime Minister and the Premier, asking for an urgent meeting and a Plan B when it comes to Manitoba's winter road system. Walter Westacekut suggests that the federal government and the Federal Emergencies Act might be needed to move essential goods into fly-in communities. I spoke with the Grand Chief late this afternoon. What does it mean for the communities you represent if there is a dramatically shortened winter road season this year?
I think the impacts will be catastrophic. Right now, the First Nations are waiting on supplies they will need for capital projects. They're waiting for to resupply their fuel stocks. They're waiting for food to arrive.
In the letter you sent to the politicians, you mentioned one case where things had to be flown in and the cost of flying them in tripled the cost of these goods. If you had to fly in fuel, for example, or fly in construction supplies, could you afford that?
No, not at all. As you noted, the one project you referenced, there was supplies that were sent into one community at a cost of $222,000. The cost for the shipping and trucking and air handling was $555,000, for a total of $777,000. This is just one project in one community. We have 9 isolated communities with numerous projects on the go, others yet to start, so you can do the numbers.
So, for example, every year when we hear about housing shortages and the terrible living conditions, this would be a contributing factor, not being able to get the stuff up there you need to build.
Yes.
You need a Plan B, you say in your letter. What Plan B do you want to see?
What I would like to see is major investments on development of all-weather road systems in the north, airport improvements. The federal government has been delinquent for so long in meeting the needs of our people. It is now 2024, and still our people are relying on the dwindling winter road season to access goods into their communities. That shouldn't be the case.
You also mentioned the Emergencies Act. Do you believe it should be enacted?
I believe in this situation it should be enacted. If there is no access, as I say, that one example of where flying in supplies to one community tripled the cost beyond the material costs. So there's 9 communities out there waiting for fuel, food, supplies. The costs are going to rise astronomically.
You have asked for an emergency meeting, an urgent meeting with provincial and federal officials to discuss this. What have you heard back from them at this point?
I have heard nothing back from anybody except our local MLA, Eric Redhead. He's a former chief of Manitoba First Nation, former chair of our tribal council, so he's really in a position to understand the predicament that our First Nations are in at this time.
And what did he say to you?
Right now, I have been receiving updates from a number of First Nations on their progress on their winter roads. A couple of them are open for half-ton trucks. Unfortunately, it's not half-ton trucks that will deliver the goods that are needed in our communities. It's heavy-duty trucks that need 36 inches of ice to travel on these winter roads. So we, at this time, when I spoke to MLA Eric Redhead, we talked about giving it some time. We noted that sometimes winter road will open up for heavy traffic first week of February. We're now in the first week of January. We'll see how that goes.
How hopeful are you at this point, sir?
Well, with the warm weather, I'm not very hopeful. I'm not confident that we will have the ice and the snow that we need for heavy trucking.
Grand Chief Walter Wostacekut, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, I asked both the federal and provincial governments for a response to the Grand Chief's concerns. The federal government says it's still working on its response. The province sent me a statement late this afternoon saying it is committed to working with all levels of government and the communities themselves to improve winter roads and to ensure they're open as long as possible. Still ahead, at least 95 people are dead in southern Iran after explosions ripped through a crowd. The attack has added to tension, and the region is already on edge because of Israel's war with Hamas. We'll have more from the Middle East after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. There are growing fears that Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza could expand into a regional conflict. This has been a worry for a while, but now a drone strike yesterday, which killed a senior Hamas official in Lebanon, has led to threats of retaliation against Israel. CBC's Sasha Petrusik has the latest.
With frontier skirmishes almost every day, Israeli bombs and shells land inside Lebanon. Rockets from the militant group Hezbollah, an ally of Hamas, hit communities in Israel. But this, yesterday's airstrike in Beirut, killing senior Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri, could spark far more fighting, say Israeli residents in border towns. Definitely something will happen now, he says. There will be a war here. Israel won't say if it killed al-Aruri, but leaders of Israeli security forces, like the head of the spy agency Mossad, vow to get Hamas leaders, no matter where they are. And today, the head of Hezbollah promised revenge. The assassination will not go unanswered or unpunished, says Hassan Nasrallah. That worries Washington.
We remain incredibly concerned, as we have been from the outset of this conflict, about the risk of the conflict spreading into other fronts.
The kind of conflict that's leveled Gaza and even now has Palestinian civilians running for their lives as Israeli airstrikes target a refugee camp in central Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 120 have died in the past 24 hours. Throughout the Palestinian territories, including the occupied West Bank, Palestinians are calling for even more resistance and retribution. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
And now at least 95 people have reportedly been killed in a pair of explosions in southern Iran. State media says more than 200 other people were hurt. The blast happened during a commemoration ceremony for a prominent Iranian general. He was killed in an American drone strike back in 2020. Iranian officials say the explosions, which came about 20 minutes apart, were bombs triggered by terrorists. No one has claimed responsibility for the blasts, which happened about 800 kilometers southeast of the capital, Tehran. A Liberal member of Parliament here in Canada wants to change the oath of office for federal politicians. Renee Arsenault, who's from New Brunswick, has introduced a bill that would remove swearing allegiance to the monarch. And while Canadian Republicans are receptive to the idea, Royalists are riled. CBC's John Paul Tasker reports.
The tradition has endured since Canada's founding.
I do swear that I will be faithful, and bear true allegiance,
Parliamentarians swearing an oath of allegiance to the monarch.
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Now, a private member's bill proposes a big change. It would make the traditional oath optional for MPs and senators. Introduced only in French, the proposal would allow an alternative oath, with no mention of the country's head of state.
I don't see the word Canada in there.
This man fought a case against the requirement of a similar royal oath for federal public servants.
They gave me an ultimatum. They told me, you take the oath or you get fired. I told them, nope.
Pierre Vincent won. It's now optional for bureaucrats.
The tradition itself is not a good reason to be doing things like this, to be violating free speech.
This bill, it's stupid because we have a perfectly functioning system.
This monarchist is adamantly opposed to changing the oath. John Fraser says the country's long-standing ties to the crown are something to celebrate.
We live in a constitutional crown system, and trying to break it up and piecemeal it is not a good way to run a country.
This royal expert says legislation alone may not be enough. All 10 provinces may have to agree to a change, and the courts could weigh in.
That it's not just about personal allegiance to Charles III, that it's about your allegiance to Canada's Constitution, Canada's people, Canada's system of governance.
The country's divided on the Crown's future in Canada. Polls suggest more than half want to cut ties. That's unlikely to happen on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's watch. He says King Charles is someone who's deeply aligned with Canadian values. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Emergency rooms right across Canada are dealing with a surge in respiratory illnesses, and they're struggling. The illnesses are COVID, RSV, and the flu. But the situation is being made much worse by the major staffing shortages we have across the country. Not only a problem here, it's led to overflowing hospitals and long wait times. Lauren Pelly has more on the story.
You're gonna sleep right after, huh? Of course you are.
While many Canadians relaxed over the holidays, Joey Salmingo took his newborn to a crowded hospital with a fever.
It took an hour just to see a triage nurse.
Oh, I know. And it was 7 more hours until Salmingo's son was admitted to a bed.
So as the hours just went by, obviously the frustration, the anger is setting in.
Patients across the country keep facing those kinds of hours-long waits. In Quebec, provincial data shows dozens of hospital ERs are overflowing. And the average waiting time on a stretcher hit 18 hours by Tuesday afternoon.
This is the worst the healthcare system has been ever. You know, we're seeing patients in stretchers laying there for days on end.
This nurse in Montreal says long waits are tied to ongoing staff shortages and pressure from the usual respiratory viruses, plus COVID as well.
COVID is rampant throughout the hospitals, throughout every unit.
At St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, upwards of 10% of patients on the wards are COVID positive.
It's often COVID intersecting with other illnesses and making people sick enough to end up in hospital.
He says most patients falling seriously ill with either COVID or influenza are also people who didn't get the latest vaccines. Federal data shows only 15% of the population got an updated COVID shot this fall.
Our vaccination rates across most populations and age groups, and in particular in children, are lower than we have seen in the past.
Doctors say there's still plenty of time to get those updated shots. COVID is still circulating, and the flu season in much of eastern Canada isn't expected to peak for several weeks. That means a busy winter ahead, and the more Canadians who can stay out of hospital, the better. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
So what can we do to improve our health overall and help the system? Well, the fitness industry is calling for a national tax credit to help get Canadians active. They say the healthcare system suffers when Canadians are out of shape. But as Renee Filipponi explains, a tax credit incentive may not help those who need it most.
Awesome job! At Orange Theory Fitness in Edmonton, it's all about motivation. Get those feet moving! The fitness industry, hit hard by the pandemic, is still recovering, and now inflation is weighing on it too.
But at the end of the day, it's costing them dollars, and if they, if they're thinking that they don't have the dollars to put food on their table, it's one of the things that does unfortunately have to go. And so it's the number one reason that we have people quitting today.
Yeah. The fitness industry is calling on the federal government to include gym memberships as a medical expense on their taxes to make it more affordable.
Any incentive is an incentive to get people started.
They also point to research that working out improves health and can reduce the strain on the healthcare system.
We are in a healthcare crisis, and there's a 2023 report published in the Canadian Journal of Public Health that actually states that in Canada, due to sedentary behavior, we are losing $2.2 billion.
A tax credit is already offered in Newfoundland for things like swimming lessons and gym memberships, valued at $348 per family. Ottawa says it's committed to helping Canadians become more active, but when asked about a tax rebate, it pointed instead to its $10 million investment in programs like Participation to increase daily physical activity.
On some level, does this line the pockets of big corporations?
This SFU researcher says a tax credit won't necessarily help low-income Canadians who often struggle to find time for the gym or can't pay the costs up front.
If we think about, beyond the scope of, let's say, low-income Canadians, We're also thinking about, well, how do we ensure that the people that are going to the gym are actually getting the long-term benefits of this? How do we track that?
For these gym regulars struggling with the soaring cost of living, any break is welcome.
This is going to be so much less money for the fitness I spend, and so much more money I can put into groceries and household spending.
Work for that distance. Helping to pick up the fitness pace this year. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
And this is the time of year you might set resolutions. We'll talk about that a little later in the program. You know, the London Zoo in England is trying to get things set in this new year by taking stock of all the animals in its care.
They're on their way. Sorry, it's very quick.
So every zoo inhabitant there will have to be counted and registered over the next few days. There are those who line up quietly because of, treats. But it's hard to expect creatures of all stripes to behave. Some show no signs of taking things seriously, while some other striped creatures stay curious. There were some head-scratching moments, however. London Zoo is home to more than 300 different species, all adding up to about 14,000 residents. Earth's orbit is littered with space junk left behind from decades of space missions, and the risks posed by that fast-moving debris goes up with every new launch. After the break, we'll have more on the issue of cleaning up space clutter. Well, contrary to the classic rock tune, what goes up does not always come down. And that is especially true in Earth's orbit. It is littered with junk left behind from decades of space missions. And that risk posed by that fast-moving debris only goes up with every new launch. Nicole Mortolero looks at the issue of cleaning up space clutter.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Space is becoming a very busy place. Since the first satellite blasted into orbit in 1957, there have been more than 6,000 launches. Today, there are, on average, 2 launches a week, driven mainly by SpaceX. Those thousands of launches have left behind a lot of space junk.
When you launch a satellite, you also bring the last stage of the rocket into a stable orbit where the objects can stay for years.
Eventually, the harsh environment of space breaks them down into much smaller pieces, traveling at nearly 8 kilometers a second. And this threatens the satellites we depend on, those that provide us with TV, that monitor weather, disasters, and more.
If your mission, your satellite gets hit by a debris, it could mean the end of your mission. That means all your investment and all the benefit for people on Earth would disappear immediately.
And we've seen the kind of damage small particles can do. But space agencies like NASA and the European Space Agency do track debris to avoid this from happening. And now a Canadian company is stepping in. In January, the Montreal-based North Star Earth and Space will launch 4 satellites to monitor space debris.
In low Earth orbit, we track objects down to about 1 centimeter. In medium Earth orbit, it would be about 7 to 10 centimeters. And in geostationary orbit, it would be around 40 to 50 centimeters.
But there's been a wider call for companies to be more responsible, not leaving anything behind.
It means you do the same as you would do in every national park, right? The stuff you bring in, you take out again. That's the principle we want to apply.
The European Space Agency has also called for a zero debris charter to clean up orbital debris by 2030. But that will take new innovation and money. Nicole Mortolero, CBC News, Toronto.
Weather Update is brought to you by the Art and Beauty of the National Ballet of Ukraine, January 29th at the Burton Cummings Theatre. Tickets at nationalballetukraine.com.
Meteorologist John Sauter joins us now to talk a little bit more about the snow up north.
Yeah, snow up north. I want to time it out a little bit for people because it'll hit the west overnight tonight, areas like Flin Flon, and then kind of get into the Thompson area. But we'll put some times on this for you and show you the projected snowfall. Expect flurries in through the Paw, Flin Flon in the overnight period. Maybe not so much the Paw, but around Lynn Lake. And by 6 a.m., we've already got 3 centimeters around Lynn Lake and 1 centimeter in the Thompson area. Not much in Norway House at that point. If we travel ahead here to about noon, we've got 5 centimeters on the ground in Thompson, 6 in Lynn Lake, and 3 farther north in Brochet, and 1 in the Paw, 1 in Norway House. And then the system continues to move off in the afternoon out to the east, where we see more accumulating snow, 3 to 5 centimeters from Gillam down through Shamattawa, God's Lake, and Island Lake. So that's the system that'll continue to move off into northwestern Ontario through the end of Thursday, and then we see some of that moving into southern Manitoba on Friday from a separate system, which I'll show you again a little bit later. But winds are part of the story tomorrow. Generally a sun-cloud mix. In the morning, we see these velocities out of the south at about 20 to 30 through the Red River Valley. That's at 9 a.m. And then on into the afternoon, we see winds more like 35 to 40 kilometers per hour through areas in the Interlake, Gimli, up through Fisher Branch, Winnipeg, with gusts to about 35 or 40 in the afternoon. And then as we get through Thursday night and on into Friday, winds are much quieter. So be prepared for a little bit of that wind tomorrow. Temperatures will drop off overnight tonight. Right now we're at -9 to -10 in most regions around the Red River Valley. Out to the west, we have some minus double digits. Dauphin at -14, Brandon currently at -10, and we've got a -16 right now in Red Lake. And in advance of that snow, we've got temperatures in the north that are looking quite seasonal. -21 in Gillam is the coldest number. Right now, -18 in Churchill. So the forecast for tonight, Not a lot going on. Might see a few snowflakes here and there in a few regions, but generally it's a partly cloudy sky overnight in northwestern Ontario. Here in southern Manitoba, minus 14 for Winnipeg, pretty close to that in surrounding regions, as low as minus 15 up around Lac de Bonnie and Pinawa. Minus 14s in the west, minus 12s for Portage, Morden, and Winkler, Carman too. And then in the north, we see the flurries overnight, and we've got 2 to 4 centimeters moving from west and on into Thompson. So a couple of centimeters by early in the morning in Thompson. And as I showed you, that just continues to move across the province through the day tomorrow. Could see as much as 10 centimeters by Thursday night or Friday morning in the Thompson area. So yes, some accumulating snow tomorrow in the north. Here, much quieter in the south and milder in the southwest, anywhere from minus 3 to minus 5, but more like minus 6s and minus 7s here in the southeast and off into northwestern Ontario. We're looking at temperatures just a little bit cooler, a minus 8 tomorrow in Kenora.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
The start of a new year can involve intending to change in some way. CBC mental health columnist Mark Hennick joins us after the break to talk about some mentally healthy solutions and resolutions and how you might just set yourself up for success. Stay with us. So here we are at the start of a new year. A recent survey by the American Psychological Association shows those of us who make New Year's resolutions, of those, nearly a third of those resolutions focus on some aspect of mental health. Mark Hennick is a mental health author and a CBC columnist who's been digging into this most recent survey. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Janet.
So what were the top ways people resolved to improve their mental health?
So as you mentioned, we know that almost 80% of people will make a resolution of some sort, and about 28% are mental health related. Now, if you actually dig down a little bit deeper into that segment of mental health related resolutions, turns out that about 67% of those plan to exercise more with the specific goal of improving their mental health. Then about half, 49%, plan to meditate more, and 40% plan to focus on spirituality. So it's really interesting to see that meditation and spirituality piece making the top three in that way.
What do you make of that?
You know, I'm not really sure what that means, but I think for me anyway, it sort of reflects this loneliness that people are feeling and this sense of isolation. There's no greater way to build connection, I think, than to connect with something that is bigger than yourself. And if that's your conceptualization of God or of a social cause or of anything transcendent, I think that really meets this need that people seem to be expressing to break out of their loneliness and isolation and connect with meaning.
Some other folks may have decided that they are going to exercise more or they are going to eat well, because we know that those things can also help with mental health. How do you propose we stick to those resolutions? Any tips?
Yeah, so it's so important, first of all, that we reflect on the reasons for our resolutions. And in many ways, the reasons ought to come first, and then the resolution comes later. So get really clear on why you want to make the change that you do. And then when you have a sense of that, really set some tangible targets for yourself. It's not enough to just say that you want to, for example, save $10,000 maybe, or that you just want to exercise more. Really give it a timeline and give it some meat on the bones, because then you can actually create a plan. You can find ways to break that down into smaller, more manageable chunks, and you can celebrate your successes along the way. That's so important, to really give yourself a practical working plan rather than just some vague, amorphous idea of a resolution.
Somebody once said to me, when you make a plan, the universe laughs because plans, as you know, sometimes get derailed. It's easy when you say, okay, I resolved to do this, and then perhaps life gets in the way. You can beat yourself up a lot about that and feel like a failure. What's your advice there?
You sure can. I mean, look, be gentle with yourself. The reality is that surveys have consistently showed that up to 80% of people will abandon their New Year's resolution by February. February, Janet. That's not very long. So look, you're not alone in this, but what that also means is that you can surround yourself with a group of people who have similar goals, and you can actually be each other's accountability partners. That meets that goal of building connection, but it also greatly increases your chances of actually following through on your resolution. So stay flexible with it, have fun with it, and make sure you use it to connect with others.
Mark Hennick, thank you so much for your time today. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Janet. Happy New Year.
John's back with your 7-day forecast after the break, and then we'll have your daily lift. Stay.
Here is a look at your 7-day forecast. Tomorrow, not quite as cool as today, -7, but it will be a bit on the breezy side. And then we could see some overnight flurries Thursday into Friday. The accumulating snow will be Friday here in the Red River Valley, likely Friday night and through part of Saturday. That's when we could see 4 or 5 centimeters of fresh snow. A lot of people going, hooray for that. More flurries on Sunday, and look at the temperatures next week. By this time next week, yes, below seasonal, a high of -15 on Wednesday. I know, and it gets colder after that even. So a cold snap is coming. Now, you were saying, Janet, that New Year's often finds people setting resolutions and goals for themselves.
Yeah, it does. So CBC asked people at the Forks, when they went there to visit recently, what they hope to accomplish in 2024. Here is your Daily Lift.
I'm here for studies and I want to be punctual and I want to be a good student and I want good grades. So I want to study hard and make a gym resolution that I want to go to the gym regularly. And apart from that, here everybody's really punctual. So I want to be too. I landed here on the 13th of December and I came from India and it's so beautiful. And I like I like Winnipeg because of the snow. It's really beautiful, and the views are like exceptional. I love the place.
I guess like just trying to balance out life, like pretty much like everything. So like our family, our spiritual life, and also like our academic wise, and then also our health, of course. So yeah.
I wanna try and hit Europe, and I wanna go down to America and see my friends there.
And where in Europe and places there would you hope to go?
Oh, Italy and Greece. We really want to go to Italy and Greece.
Yeah, honestly, I think I'm coming up here on my last year of high school, and I want to try my best to, battle senioritis and find the motivation to go to class when I already have my acceptance letters from university.
Probably go to the gym, yeah, and work on my health more and prioritize my well-being.
How long do you think you'll be able to keep that up for? I know that's always seems to be the trouble sometimes, is people start and then they fall off. But what do you think?
I want to say probably for the rest of my life, but that's kind of hopeful. Realistically, maybe 2 months.
It's better than I usually make it.
Yeah, I didn't really make a resolution other than the usual one: eat less shortbread, less chocolate, stuff like that.
How'd you do with that?
It hasn't gone well so far.
Well, it's hard to stay away from much chocolate. Thank you for being with us this evening. We'll see you tonight at 11.
See you later.